Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Earwax. It's Colin, and today we're going to be doing a review of the brand new album from TURNSTILE, Never Enough. So, this is the fourth full-length studio LP from Baltimore-based hardcore punk band TURNSTILE, and yeah, to say that they have evolved their sound is a little bit of an understatement, especially for this record. I got into TURNSTILE like a lot of people with their breakout album Glow On. Buddy of mine who's actually from Baltimore turned me on to them. Now I had heard their name and probably like heard a song here and there over the years, but they were never someone I like really got super into or dedicated enough time to. And it actually took me a few listens to really get into Glow On, but when I finally did, man, I was hooked. And I went back, listened to their other two LPs, some of their demos and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, they're definitely an incredible band. You can just tell the raw talent that they have, and I feel like on each LP they've just gotten a little bit better. And they've definitely flirted with other sounds besides like straight up hardcore, but like the core of their albums, at least up until this point, have been their unique brand of hardcore punk. And while they've thrown in bits and pieces of like alt rock and some post-punk and some new wave and like even some shoegaze at certain parts, nothing quite like what they came together and did on this album. And yeah, it's absolutely incredible. But before we get into the music itself, let's talk about the physical release. But before we do that, guys, if you could please like, subscribe, comment down below, all that stuff helps out my channel a ton. So I was actually super pleased with just like the outside packaging for this physical release. I love any time that they like kind of have an outer sleeve or like some way for you to like not damage the shrink wrap or cellophane as you're like taking the record out. So I do have it in an exterior sleeve here, but I'll go ahead and pull the rest of it out. I already have just the actual like vinyl and its own interior sleeve. It actually came with this, so that right off the bat is like bonus points, the fact that it came with its own high quality lined inner sleeve, but we'll get into that in a sec. The actual album artwork, very simple, very minimalist. It does kind of tie into the theme of Glow On, where that was like a pink album with some clouds. This looks just like a cloudless sky. The back, very simple, very understated, and I like that a lot. On the inside, you got a few things here, and let's see if we can pull them out. So you do have just kind of this exterior outer sleeve, but then on the inside, you do have like a regular kind of gatefold, which I actually think is really cool. Like it came with its own exterior sleeve. I do love the artwork here as well. Again, it's very simplistic, very minimalist, but it fits so well with the theme of the album and like the vibe of everything. You've got the lyrics printed on the inside here, as well as some credits. And yeah, I think it's very muted, it's very simple, it's very straightforward, but it just fits the vibe of everything so well. And I'm a huge fan anytime any band, musician, artist, what have you, takes the time to like really put some thought into the physical release of their records. And I think they just absolutely knocked it out of the park with this one. So there's a bunch of different variants you could order for this. I specifically got the jet ski because I have this thing about wanting my records to match like the artwork. So it's this really cool like blue color with this awesome just kind of like wave pattern coming out from the middle. Yeah, just absolutely gorgeous. Super happy with it. Sound quality is great too. Exactly the level of volume that I want from a record. No cracks, no pops, super crisp, super clear. So yeah, overall, super happy with that. It did come in today. So this is Monday, June 9th. So a few days after the release, but honestly not bad. I mean, within 3 days is pretty solid. So but yeah, super happy with the physical release. I'm really pleased, again, anytime a band like puts some effort, puts some energy into what they're giving the fans, and they pay money to support them, and they definitely knocked it out of the park. So with this out of the way, let's talk about the music itself. So the album opens up with the title track of Never Enough, And this has this really sort of like dreamy pop synth lead intro into some like early to mid 2000s coded alt rock with some slightly fuzzy guitars and some driving drums. The bass here kind of just pulling it all together, and the vocals are very like angelic and ethereal and kind of dreamy throughout. There's this really cool like soloing towards the end. And yeah, after hearing this like single, I wasn't exactly sure what the rest of the album was going to give us, because it doesn't they do such a good job of this, but it doesn't not sound like Turnstile, because it definitely does. But also at the same time, it is a new sound for them for sure, and it was a direction that I wasn't expecting them to go, but they did it super well, and it sounds really really good. And then after that we get into Soul, which is the first of a few like genuine actual hardcore punk songs on the album. You've got some more like traditional Turnstile vocal stylings here, some driving guitars, pounding drums. Definitely leans a little bit more into like the melodic hardcore space than just straight up hardcore, but they do it super well. There's this really cool sort of like synthy bridge like towards the end of it. And this song is just such a great example of like, you don't need the instrumentation to be overly complicated or intricate to just be really really good, and I think they nail that balance super well here. And then like the drums are just such a highlight for me on this album. They start off very just like rhythmic and pounding, like that traditional sort of like punk drum sound that you want to hear. But when they get into the kind of like synthy bridge that it ends up being a little bit later, they get a little bit more like tom focused and almost a little bit more kind of like a tribal like groove to them, and it works super super well. And then after that they get into I Care, and I Care is just a straight up like post punk new wave track. And they've like flirted with this sound before, but this is the first time I've heard them like really commit to it. And man, they just knock it out of the park. It's got like soft Police vibes and late era like The Clash. I think Brandon's vocals work really well with this genre, and altogether the instrumentation here is just absolutely killer. The drums and guitar is very like 80s coded. You've got the really groovy, kind of almost funky bass line that's really carrying the song along. And then towards the end, the tempo drops out and you get some of like that borderline reggae influenced new wave that again like the Police kind of became known for, with some of their time signatures and like tuning of their instruments on some of their stuff. And yeah, I would love to hear like a full album of them doing just this style, or even like an EP. And this immediately went on like my post-punk new wave playlist, and I am super stoked to continue to listen to it down the road. After that is Dreaming, and this starts off with like some Latin inspired horns that almost trick you into thinking that you're about to get like a fucking ska song, but then they use it sparingly enough that it doesn't get like played out. You don't get bored with it, and really at its core it's kind of like a 90s inspired alt rock track. It's borderline like dance rock at certain parts, but with some edge. And again, it's still, everything still very much sounds like Turnstile. And I think that's one of the things that really defines like an amazing band, is if you can do an album where you're experimenting with all these different sounds and genres and ideas and themes, but still, no matter what, like having it sound like yourself. There's very few bands that can pull that off this well. I mean, I'd say like The Clash is such a good example of like how they experimented with so many different genres and so many different sounds, but like the minute the song came on, you knew it was a Clash song. And I have to say, like this album is doing that for me so hard. It's so impressive how they never lose their core sound while still being this diverse. Like it's really difficult to do. And then after that is Light Design, which is a very melodic kind of like softer alt rock track. Some dream pop vibes here as well. Some of the most beautiful guitar work on the entire album. And yeah, it's just it's really impressive again, like how they just went so diverse on this album while still just knocking out of the park at every single corner. And then we get into Dull. And Dull is right back into the hardcore, right back into the speed, the aggressiveness, reminding you that at the end of the day, they are a hardcore punk band. It's really well placed on the album. There's a couple moments that give you some like weird Kid A inspired like electronic samples that do take you out of it a little bit, but then they like throw you right back in. So yeah, it was interesting. I think it was very intentional that they kind of broke up some of the intensity with these weird sort of like electronic bits, because then we get into Sun Shower, and Sun Shower comes right out of the gate swinging with probably like one of their fastest, just like borderline thrash skate punk songs you've ever heard. I mean, just makes you want to fucking mosh and get right in the middle of it and jump off the stage. And if you've watched footage of their live shows, you know that's what the majority of the crowd is doing most of the time. And yeah, just absolutely killer track. It just comes out to you loud and fast and hard. And then it like stops. At towards the middle of this song, all that intensity drops out into this really dreamy sort of like synth and flute like dreamscape bit, and somehow it works so fucking well. Like it shouldn't. It Nothing about this song makes sense, going from like this in your face hardcore punk into this flute driven like feels like you're coming down off of a Vision Quest type of experience, but somehow it works. And I don't understand it. I can't explain it. You're just gonna have to listen to it for yourself. But yeah, it's still like three, four. What am I? 5 listens in at this point, and it still throws me off every single time, but in such a good way. And then after that is Look Out for Me, which starts with some more of the kind of like new wave post punk style guitar work before getting into one of the catchiest riffs that they've written on the entire album, getting back into the punk vibes. And yeah, again, just another great example of like, you don't need a riff or a melody to be overly complex to just be absolutely killer. And again, they knock it out of the park with this one. And then it drops into this like synthy dream pop sequence that takes up like the back half of the song, which again should not work but does super well. Like the mix of the synths and the dreamy vocals and the drums here and it all comes together so well after again you just had a fairly like straight up punk vibe, and it should not work. I'm so confused by this, but it's fucking incredible. It's so well done. There's some parts of it that have like some psych rock leanings. There's like these sweeping, soaring solos here and there, or at least one for sure. And yeah, I'm blown away by how they managed to pull all this off. And then we get into a bit of a transition track with Ceiling, which has some like interesting filtered sort of like high pitched vocals over some like droning synths. But it's only about a little over a minute long, and it leads into Seeing Stars, which is their second like straight up just new wave like post punk track. A lot more of the 80s vibes and the drum tones and the guitar tones. But yeah, again, it still works super well. I'm glad that we got more than one of these on the album. Towards the end, there's some 80s inspired arena rock soloing, and it's better than the vast majority of artists that are doing that style these days. I won't name any names, but you probably know who they are. Somehow, when they're not even trying to do that, they still sound better than all of them. And then that leads into Birds, and it starts off with this very like ominous synth lead. And it's such a great foreshadower, because you're like, all right, I just had like a couple fairly chill songs, or at least one very chill song, and like the second half of a chill song, or a chill second half of a song. This sound, this synth tone that they're going with here makes me believe that maybe the next song isn't gonna be quite as laid back. And that's exactly what happens, because Bird hits you in the face like a ton of bricks. It's just loud, angry, aggressive, just right back to their hardcore roots, and reminding you that like even though they're experimenting with all these other sounds, this is their core and they still do it incredibly well. And yeah, absolutely killer track. Would love to see this one live. I'm sure the energy is just out the roof, even though the majority of footage I've seen of their live shows recently has been outdoors. But either way, like yeah, this song is just absolutely incredible. And then after that is the song Slow Dive, which when I saw it on the track list, thought maybe it's a nod to the band and they're, actually doing some sort of like shoegaze stuff here, but it's really more of just like a lower tempo, like melodic punk song. There's definitely some elements of like alt rock in which you kind of consider shoegaze, but not quite as much as what comes on the next few songs. But yeah, it's fun. The name fits perfectly. It definitely is one of those songs that makes you kind of want to like stomp around and do one of these while you're like kind of waiting on the edge of the pit. And yeah, absolutely killer song as well. Which by this point, if you can't tell, I think that about pretty much all the songs. And then we get into the last couple songs, starting with "Time Is Happening." And this one I'd say is probably the closest they get to like true shoegaze. I'd say it's more like shoegaze coated alt rock. Some dreamy vocals, some soaring guitar, some pounding drums, very rhythmic, very melodic. Really well done, and it kind of fades out into these dreamy synths of the last song of Magic Man. Now, if you've watched enough of my videos, you know I put a lot of emphasis on the last song of an album. I think what separates good albums from great albums is how you finish. And at this point, on my very first listen, I was like, all right, they could go one of two directions here, and I'd be fine with either of them. They could either just go out on a bang, come back with a super heavy track, remind everyone who they are, why they're one of the biggest names in the scene right now, or they could just lean fully into this new weird mix of sounds that they've been experimenting with on this album and kind of just sign off on being like, hey, we don't give a fuck. This is what we wanted to try, and you're either going to like it or you're not. And that's what they did. This is a straight up, just like synth driven dream pop outro, really. Like, it doesn't even necessarily feel like a complete song, but so much of this album is so just like choppy and quick, and even the longer sort of like transition pieces between the intensity definitely still feel like make it feel like a punk album, because you've got a lot of just like short bursts of like speed and intensity. And so to end on something like this, I think was incredibly ballsy, and I do think it works super well. It's got a really nice calming vibe, and kind of just being like, hey, yeah, we could do another like fast in your face punk song, but instead we're going to end on this really like calming and comforting kind of just like dream pop piece, and remind you that we can do whatever the fuck we want. And it somehow works super well. So yeah, if you can't tell by now, I love this album. This might be not just the best album of the year, but it might be the best album of the decade. Like, that's a pretty big statement, and we got 5 years left to go in the 2020s. So very easily something you can buy and upend it. But it's been a long time since I've heard something that not only took this many risks, but also like knocked it out of the park with every single one that they took. So yeah, I'm gonna give this album an A+. Go listen to it if you haven't yet. Like, I don't care if you like punk at all, if you like hardcore, if you like dream pop, if you like shoegaze, all rock. Like, everyone needs to listen to this album at least once. I'm gonna give it an A+. The packaging was absolutely killer. The album itself is amazing. Yeah, what else can I say about it? Go listen to it. It's probably going to be my #1 album of the year. We'll see. There's more music to come out, but yeah, dethroned Deaf Heaven, dethroned Psychedelic Porn Crumpets, Turnstile, Never Enough, now #1. All right, guys, that's going to be it for me. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, I'll talk to you later. Peace.